What? What? Why? Not again. Look. I guess there's no helping it. It's time once again. Hello ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode, in which we will be showing off 5 more unknown Wii Hidden Gems. I have spent the past 2 years scouring the Wii library, and from here on in I'm instituting a bit of a rule change. Multi-platform games will be allowed on the list. In the past I've kept games off of the Wii Hidden Gems list if they weren't just Wii games. But since then I have realized, if I want to play it on the Wii, I'll play it on the Wii. And if I want to play it on another console, I'll do that. I would like to give you that opportunity if you want it. I have covered lists of Wii games multiple times in the past, and if you want to see those, then check the cards up here. I'll also link them down in the description below. I have a few more videos on the topic coming up, so if you want to see those when they come out, go ahead and subscribe and ring the bell. In the time between this video and the last video, I've found a solid chunk of surprisingly good games. I'm really excited to talk about the best of them with you here today, and I'd like to get them out as fast as possible, so we're going to be doing this in separate videos. This is the first of 3 different videos, and then that'll be followed up by some runner-up type games. If you love the Wii and are looking to squeeze out just a few more games to play from it, then it's very likely you'll find something new here. With that being said, let's hop into the list. Chaotic Shadow Warriors. I bought this game on somewhat of a whim. It just seemed like the kind of licensed game that, if the developers cared about it, had a lot of great potential to be fun. I'm happy to report that this game really delivered. You play as the series protagonist, Tom, and run around doing simple platforming in the overworld, exploring the chaotic universe Param. You also get a gun for fighting simple enemies in the overworld, and if I'm honest, it's basic, but it can be fun to solve the puzzles and to see what the world has to offer. It's no wonder that this game was overlooked, being a licensed game for a card game / TV series. It sounds like it has a strong chance to be shovelware, especially when the developers have a name like Fun Labs. Despite what it has going against it though, Fun Labs seem to really care about the game. They didn't skimp out on the world, they developed a comprehensive experience here. Param feels large and interesting to explore, and the combat is fun and engaging once you get the hang of it. You acquire monsters to use in combat by utilizing a great risk-reward mechanic. When an enemy begins an attack, you have 2 choices. You can go for a block and reduce the damage by shaking the Wii remote back and forth, or you can try to scan it. When you're scanning the enemy, you must keep the Wii Remote pointer on a reticle that moves around the monster. And if you keep the pointer on the reticle, then the percentage will continue to rise. You'll very likely not get a full scan off of one enemy attack, but if you're really clever about the way that you handle it, you can scan the monster for the first part of the attack and at the last moment swap to blocking. This encourages the player to really learn the attack animations for each move. Another fun thing is that you can get a full scan of the same monster more than once in one battle. I've knocked out all the enemies except one before, and then just kept them around to scan them until I had at least 3 full scans to use. Once you've scanned a monster, you can utilize them for yourself in battle. Those 3 scans can be merged together to make a more powerful monster. The system has a lot of fun ideas that come together really well. The combat has a few layers to it. You and your opponent can have 6 monsters on the field at one time. The game has a formation system that I assume must emulate the playfield in the chaotic card game. If that's the case, they've done a great job adapting the idea to a classic RPG system. The 3 upfront monsters can do pretty much anything, and then the 3 monsters in the back can taunt, cast spells, and use items. When you command a monster to attack, you have a simple sequence of motions to go for full damage. Every step of the fight is just really engaging because of these systems mixed in. On top of all that, there's a type system that mixes it up a little bit from the conventional idea. Monsters are of different types as well as the attacks, much like Pokemon, but here the monsters you can have on the field are actually directly influenced by the type system. Some different monster types don't get along and can't be out at the same time, creating another interesting dynamic for the combat system that you have to keep in mind. Now, reviews at the time claimed that the game was only for hardcore fans of the show, but I strongly disagree. I have never seen or played Chaotic, and I could follow the story well enough to enjoy it. I didn't have full context as to everything that was happening, but as far as the self-contained story of the game went, it wasn't that complicated. I was confused a little bit at times, but never to a point where I was more confused than I was having fun. A big world to explore, decent puzzles that are only occasionally telegraphed poorly, and a surprisingly deep combat system. This game deserves to be here. The developers put in the effort and it paid off. The game was released on PS3 and 360 as well, being largely the same, and then there's a DS version, which I believe is, from what I can tell, a bit different. I can speak for the Wii version though. It's a great experience, and you should totally give it a shot. Tintin. I grew up loving the Tintin books. I used to read them with my dad. They're so well written and illustrated, and they're a blast to read. I've read all of them, except you know which, several times over, and when the Tintin movie came out, I thought it was pretty good. It would not live up to all of the hopes I had from reading the books my whole life, but I thought it was a fun remix of sorts. My mother bought the game for my younger brother one Christmas. I was enjoying my own presents while he tried it out, and based on his lack of interest in the game, I assumed that it wasn't much to look at. I also think that a certain part of me didn't want to be disappointed by playing it and having a miserable time. But I got a comment on a previous video that made me reconsider. I borrowed my younger brother's copy with a vague general approval, I believe, and brought it home to try. This game is great. It was a huge mistake to write it off without giving it a full chance. The developers at Ubisoft and Ubisoft Montpellier did a fantastic job giving this game great game feel. I saw gameplay a few times and assumed it was a cheap side-scroller made quickly to match the release window of the movie. I'm quite happy to say that I was really wrong. That's not to say that it's not a side-scroller, but the gameplay changes consistently throughout the story. The way the sequence plays out is just sort of based on what makes the most sense for that part of the movie. And there are several 3D sequences that blend seamlessly with the main side-scrolling mode. The gameplay feels good. Tintin and Haddock feel weighty but not sluggish, which is something that I often find people mess up. The animation in this game is actually really awesome overall. Everything's just really polished, not just visually but functionally. It's somewhat of a simple game, but everything that's here feels really good. Oftentimes Wii games will have a scaled back nature to their animation set compared to their contemporary consoles. Like, all of the animations will look generally the same, but cheaper. Tintin manages to avoid that cheap feeling. In some ways, it actually reminds me of the animations in Limbo. The movie only has so much content that could be adapted to be made playable in a fun game. The way the developers handled this was actually really cool. You have a single-player main story that follows the movie, and then you have a co-op mode that lets you play two-player in more levels. They had more ideas for levels even if the movie didn't have enough content, so they just put them in anyway. The plot for these is a simple dream sequence of Captain Haddock. The mode is really fun though, with some great level designs. Unfortunately, to make this happen, they appear to have sacrificed a variety of locale. All of the extra levels appear to take place on some sort of a strange oil rig. Another distinction is these collectible coins. When you're in the hub area for the dreams, you can talk to Nestor and use coins to buy a large amount of alternative outfits, many of which are great references to stories that aren't even represented in the movie. It feels like the developers got really close to the Tintin material because they cared about the product. I am just so happy that I found out the game does not disappoint. You should absolutely give it a try.
Thank you. Hello. Do you know a certain Ben Salad?
Brave. This is actually another game that was suggested to me in the comments of my first Hidden Gem video, so special shout out to Larry Cool the Gamer. Disney Pixar's Brave was released on all major platforms in 2012, about 3 days before the movie, and received mixed reviews. I have heard many people suggest that the game probably uses an older script as the basis for its plot, because yeah, there are several components to the game that are not features of the movie. I don't know for sure if it actually does use an older script, but I would believe it. If you're wondering if you're better off trying another version of the game instead, maybe. The controls are a little interesting. It's a twin-stick shooter with only one stick. You fire in the direction that you press the D-pad. This only becomes more of an issue when you need to shoot up while jumping. For the most part though, the gameplay experience across all consoles appears to be pretty comparable. The biggest difference, outside of the resolution, is lighting and visual effects. The Wii version doesn't really feature god rays like its contemporaries. The game is the same experience though. Of course, I've only been discussing ideas about the game and not the gameplay itself, so let's get to that now. As I mentioned before, the main gameplay style is Merida and a twin-stick shooter. She obliterates enemies with her bow and infinite arrows. The game makes you stay mindful of the combat you're involved in by having multiple elemental abilities to switch between on the fly. Different enemies will have different elemental vulnerabilities to keep track of. The element affects your arrows as well as your swordplay, and each one will interact differently with the environment as well. You may have to cause plants to grow to the wall to climb up, or burn down some thorns. It's nice to see that you have some practical uses outside of combat, even if it is pretty simple. In the moment-to-moment, you're typically fighting with enemies of different weaknesses, causing you to decide who to focus on first. And you might be concerned because I said it controls with the D-pad, but even then it's not too difficult to point at the target you want. The game helps you if you aim in the right direction so that you aren't constantly missing your shots. You can purchase new abilities at merchants, which are actually just the waystones that you're purifying, wherein you can change your outfit, purchase new abilities, check out weapons, and look at your progress on tapestries. Tapestries will give you a boon for each piece that you find, and they're separated throughout the game, so you have to collect all the pieces. A few things you could purchase are charge shots for each element. Each one has its own unique effects on battle. One of them summons minions, another shoots a wall of arrows, and one explodes, that sort of thing. Outside of that, you can also buy a power attack, which you have to charge up through combat, taking damage and giving damage. This ability is also altered by your elemental status, and it can benefit you if there are a lot of a certain enemy weakness around. During combat, the longer you go killing enemies without taking damage, the more will-o-wisps that you will accrue. This increases the likelihood that you'll land critical hits, which is signified by a lightning strike. Killing enemies gives you money that is super satisfying to collect and litters the screen in a very pleasing way. The game may not look incredible, but this is definitely one of those games where all the movement feels really good. You have to play it to know exactly what I mean, but the visuals don't bother you much after you get going, and get used to how strange Merida actually looks in this game. All versions too, not just the Wii game. Behavior Interactive did a great job with this game and really made something well worth playing. I don't normally go out of my way to play twin-stick shooters, but this one is a lot of fun. Oh, and that reminds me. I mentioned that the main gameplay style is Merida. Every other gameplay style has you playing as a bear. For cute little quaint puzzle challenges, you play as the triplets. And for larger combat set pieces, you play as the mom. I believe her name is Eleanor. They work well and aren't too invasive. I think that they do a good job offering a nice change of pace without making it feel like you're just leaving the game behind to play this other thing for a little while. None of the segments are long enough to elicit that feeling regardless. To circle around, the plot is a little different. The evil big bear is here, but scratching and corrupting the waystones and creating monsters. You have to defeat the monsters and purify the waystones. This is theoretically in service of trying to turn her mother and brothers back into people. Overall, it's just a really fun game. I played it on the hardest difficulty, as I am one to do, and I thought it was a pretty decent challenge without being too unfair. I recommend most people play this way, unless you're younger and just want to play through this fun, alternate reality version of the movie plot. Go for it. I didn't get to try the co-op mode in preparation for this video, but I imagine it is a very enjoyable experience as well. Great game, give it a shot. Domino Rally. This game is super entertaining once you get to grips with the concept. It's intuitive enough to control and a lot of fun. It only has 8 levels, so I'm not going to spoil them all here for you. But this game is very creative with its not overly complex concept. You play as a local legend named Minon, with the ability to create dominoes out of thin air. He utilizes the ability to handle all kinds of amusing scenarios that made me genuinely happy just to experience. Super great, colorful graphics, an awesome soundtrack, fun gameplay, and an incredible sense of humor. This game is super underrated, and I'm really happy that I get to share it with you and get its name out there. I beat the whole game in one sitting, not because it's super short, although it isn't incredibly long, more just that I was really enjoying myself, and I was really looking forward to each new cutscene to finish one scenario and set up the next one. This game is the kind of game that you can just sort of tell is good by the cover and the logo, so I really assumed that more people had talked about it on YouTube. I got it thinking it was well known at this point, but when I went through to see, none of the bigger channels have touched on it. Some of the level themes caught me off guard with just how interesting they were, especially level 4, it's adorable. Because it can take a little getting to grips with the controls, I'm gonna explain them a little bit here. Minon will run across any object he can automatically. When he comes to the end of his track of objects, you can place dominoes down in the available direction of your choice. It can be a bit confusing to control where the dominoes go at first, but to make it easier, just imagine your cursor is on the screen. Whichever general section it is in is where the domino preview will pop up, and when you confirm it, you'll drop the dominoes. When it is where you want it, just hit B. Dropping them costs Minonade, which can be recovered when running on non-Minonade dominoes by shaking the Wii Remote in rhythm. Doing this well also speeds Minon up, which makes me think that this game would be a really interesting speedrun to watch. When you reach the end of a trail of dominoes without placing new ones yet, you'll go into balance mode. You have to carefully shift the Wii Remote back and forth to keep this cursor centered. You usually don't need to bother though, it gives you a decent amount of time to just place new dominoes and not particularly worry about it. You can also manually stop Minon by holding A, but this is mostly essential in the late game. The objective is on the right of the screen, and your Minonade and speed are on the bottom left. The gameplay is really fun and creative with WarioWare-esque humor and a great character design for Minon. I highly recommend this game. Enclave. For a while, I wasn't even sure that this game actually existed, but eventually I found a way to play it on my modded Wii. I wanted to see if it was any fun. My experience with this game has been very interesting. I think I may not get a lot of people to agree with me on the validity of this game for this list, but personally, I've really enjoyed it. After trying it out, I decided that I wanted to own a copy, so I checked around on British eBay to see if I could find one. I didn't find one for a great price, so I looked around for another copy a little bit more, until I actually found the publisher's website, Topware Interactive. I decided to give it a try, so I set up a PayPal account for extra security and purchased the game for about $18. My card actually got locked and I had to call my bank to get it fixed, but the purchase did go through. Then, 3 weeks later, the game arrived in the mail. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't a little surprised by that point. I kind of expected them to not actually send anything. But they did actually send it to me. This very well could be the only time in history someone ever actually purchased this game off their website from America. Apparently they still had copies to go around in 2021 because they sent me a brand new sealed one. I know it wasn't super popular, but it wasn't ridiculously expensive to get it either. First things first, the game looks pretty terrible. The textures are like 240p for the biggest structures. It's not really blurry so much as it is just large and pixelated. It's kind of wild how bad they actually look. The models are alright, but this is a port of an original Xbox game and it already didn't look super great then. It definitely doesn't look any better now. Second thing, When you play the game, you have to do two things: play in first person and play with a classic controller. It's actually pretty dang fun. You can think of it as Skyrim, but with a level-by-level structure instead of an open world. It's got some fun little platforming challenges and a decent combat system. It's not that the game is groundbreaking, but it is actually a really unique experience for the Wii. I can't think of any other Wii game that has this feel or gameplay to it. It's also a little bit glitchy, but I haven't encountered anything game-breaking myself. As you play through the game, you'll unlock more playable characters, and before going into levels, you have the option of equipping your characters with the gold that you've gathered through the levels. The gold system is kind of interesting. Collecting gold in a level doesn't exactly let you buy things in a conventional sense. When you equip an item, it detracts from your gold total, but when you unequip it, it adds it back into your total. Each character has their own separate gold pool, instead of making you unequip everything from other characters to max out your equipment for one character. If you have a crossbow in the first person, it basically functions as a simplistic but unique first-person shooting experience. I feel like I've lingered on this game a lot just trying to explain it, but you get the idea. It actually just feels really good to play, and it really might be worth your time. I recommend it. So that's another 5 Wii Hidden Gems that I've added to the pile for everyone to enjoy. I think all these games are great, and it's taken just about 2 years to peer through everything in the Wii library, graduate from college, and work a full-time job. Part of the reason this video contains 5 and not 10 is for my own sake. I'd like to finally put out a new video, but I am busy and I'm having to divide up my time for this kind of endeavor. I figure that I can make 2 more Hidden Gem list videos, and then a few lists for various other Wii-related topics to talk about some of the games that are more interesting, but maybe not exactly Hidden Gems. After I talk about all the Hidden Gems I want to personally talk about though, I'm then going to create one giant compilation video that includes all 40 or so games that I've personally talked about, and then a few that have already been well discussed in the community, if I find that I have something interesting I want to say about them or share them. I wouldn't have discussed them prior because they were already well known, but I would like to make this video comprehensive. I'll also tackle any games that I see most in the comments, so if you want to share a hidden gem that you love, go ahead and leave a comment down below. And if there's enough interest, I'll talk about it in one all-inclusive video covering some better-known Wii hidden gems that I actually have something to say about, which at this point sounds counterintuitive. Just to be comprehensive. So if you want to keep up with all those new videos coming out, you'll have to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified about them. I'll see you soon with 5 more hidden gems for the Nintendo Wii. Jesus loves you and so do I. Tune in next time and goodbye.